Okay, so let's talk a little bit about best practices in jQuery. And what I have is I have a jQuery app here, and it's Tweeter, surprisingly. We've all seen this before. This particular one, it's just one that we have as an example. It has all the right parts. It's got kind of a cool little pull-down box. But we're not here to talk about CSS. We're here to talk about JavaScript and jQuery and best practices for that. So this one is broken into a few files, which you may have done also. We'll start with this one little file called Composer Counter. This is the one where when you type stuff in, it changes your counter. Pretty simple. It was the first thing we did after CSS in our Tweeter, was making our little Composer Counter do its thing. So, and here we have some code, and we have a document ready, which we often have in a jQuery application. And then we said, we added a listener. In this case, we listened to the key up event in this input. This does work, but it has a couple of problems in it. And anyone can point out one obvious problem with this one.
Using key up instead of like a different.
Yeah, key up. Good point. Although key up does work. And if I type, hello, it does in fact work. But if I hold a key down, I got a problem. So that didn't work. Or what if I did that, but instead I did something like totally just out of the box and I pasted some stuff in there. Ooh, I do have a problem, don't I? Because I pasted some in there and nothing changed. I could have pasted all kinds of stuff in there and it wouldn't have given me any counter at all or any change in my counter. So it looks like I have a problem. So yeah, that's a great choice. So probably, although key up does work, if people type slowly and are careful to not hold the key down or copy and paste with the mouse, it'll work. So probably I should use something else other than key up. Any suggestions of what we can use for this one?
On input.
On input, yes, that'll work. On input is a more common one you'll see for inputs. So we do use on input quite often. However, we do use key up and key down under certain circumstances as well. So on input, and now we'll hold it down. Look at that. So it does work. So it passes that test, grabs our input every time, because now it's firing event every time the input changes in that form. Let's try our other test. Let's do a paste. So hello world, and then we'll cut that and we'll paste it back in with the mouse, and it works great. So problem solved. So yes, we normally use for input fields, we'd use an input event. Okay.
This is maybe a bit of like a side topic, but I was finding that dot on key up versus directly dot key up, it had a different behavior. And if I did dot key up, I was able to avoid some of those like edge cases.
Generally, it's the same thing. I will say, however, that using the on, it is the new way. And later on, if I get a chance to talk to you about things like WebSockets, which by the way are super awesome because all the games and stuff are WebSockets, it looks virtually identical to this, but instead of on input, it's going to be on data received, print the data, or on connect. So I do recommend to use the on pattern in your jQuery. Let's look at something else in this one. What else about this don't we like? I mean, it's not bad. How about this counter? This right there. I've got this $.counter HTML chars left, which means I'm finding that particular selector, which is in my index HTML, and I'm replacing the content of it with a number. That works fine, but look what I'm doing. I'm doing the same lookup 3 different times. And this actually takes work. This is jQuery's engine is going to find that CSS collector and create an object out of it. So it's probably a better idea to, instead of using the dollar function 3 times, probably a better idea to simply make a variable that would hold that. So I probably should go something like const counter or dollar counter. We tend to like using dollars in our jQuery variables, totally optional. But if you do, try to be consistent, equals, and we'll just assign to that just like this, there. So now we have a variable, and we've done that operation once. And instead of doing it 3 times, we just do it once, and we can use that, whoops, it's dollar counter, there, over and over again. Okay. And we can go dollar counter, HTML chars left, like this as well. Like that. Let's make sure it works. So far, so good. Looks like it's changing. Okay. And I'm going to test this, but I don't like feel like typing 140 characters. Let's just say 10. When we develop, we can use different numbers. So I'm going to change 10. If it goes over 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, there we go. It's just a little easier to test. So there's really no reason to put 140 here and then wait for this thing to overflow to 140. Just change to 10 or 5, as long as it's something we can test. 9 and 10, one more, great. One thing we can do in jQuery, we can chain operations. So this dollar counter, I can actually use that and just do this. Now this is fairly common, you'll see in jQuery. We can just do that and assign the variable and set its content at the same time. Now, once again, this is that efficiency versus readability. So don't go nuts with this. Like I wouldn't chain 5 or 6 things because then that obfuscates what you're doing. This one, it's not bad. So we can just say, yeah, set a variable to this. And by the way, set the content. But in JavaScript, readability is king. It trumps all other considerations. If that's hard to read, do it this way instead. Okay. So I can't stress that enough. Readability really is the most important thing. Let's just verify this still works again. And let's comment that there. And there, still works. So you can chain this as well, because the result of that, you can use over and over again. You can chain a lot of things, but don't overdo it. So one thing I could do, you shouldn't see else's often in your code. You shouldn't automatically write if, then else, like you just are compelled to write the word else. It has its place, but most of the time it's not necessary, because we could simply done this, just return, because we're done. No point continuing. Done that. And it just makes a little cleaner as well. So we say, look, if we don't have enough space left, we'll make it red. Otherwise, we'll carry on with our happy path. You'll hear that term happy path, which, by the way, is a real thing in software development. It means I've filtered out all the stuff I don't want, and now this is my happy path. I'm going to remove the class red because it might have been red before. If something is wrong, I'm going to check if it's less than 0 and change the class to red. I've always said that in an if statement, oftentimes check for what you don't want. Don't check for what you want. Check for what you don't want to see and handle that. You might find your code will be a lot simpler by doing that. So a couple more things. One thing I don't like about this code, and you'll see this with professional code, is document ready. Now, having one, great. It should have a document ready, but what's in it is a problem. There's a lot of stuff in that document.ready. The document ready in a jQuery application is probably going to be the first thing some other developer is going to look at and say, okay, what's going on with this code? And he's going to look at this and go, what's going on here? I see all this stuff that doesn't make any sense. You really should put just the things you want to execute on startup and nothing else. So in this case, sure, I've got my listener happening, but I got all this stuff going on here. Like, what's that? So what I would have done is done that. Take that out and instead make a function out of it. There. And I'll call it on input. There. And then just copy my function that I just took out, and there. Now I have a function called on input, and I can say, okay, well, form text area on input, I'm going to call my function on input, just like that. Your document ready should be fairly clean, because that's what people look for. And sometimes you have a lot of listeners. This is a very simple case, but you might have an application that has many, many listeners setting up submit handlers, click handlers. You can't be burying all of that in all these anonymous functions. So it is a good idea to pull the functions out, make them named, and just put your listeners there. So this is much more clear. When this page starts up, it's going to set a listener for input, and it's going to call this function on input. That event, don't need the event because it's not used. I can delete that if I want. So by the way, all listeners or event handlers will get an event parameter. In this case, we don't need it. Okay. Now, what else problem we have? Well, one obvious thing is also, look what we're doing here. Do we need the parentheses after on input? It's a function. So the on function, which is the set up a listener function of jQuery, takes two parameters, the event to listen for. So listen for an event called input. And oh, by the way, when you get one, run this function. Run the function called on input. To do this, that would run it immediately. This is like if someone says, oh, Gary, can you please give me your phone number? I say, here's my phone number. I'm not going to call my phone and say, here's what you hear when you call my phone. No, I'm going to say, this is my phone number. I will let you call it. So that's the difference here. Oftentimes, that's one of the big questions is when do we add parentheses, when we don't? In this case, this isn't going to happen here. So when my program starts up, I'm not going to call on input. I'm going to give that listener the name of the function. I'm going to give it the phone number. And then when it's ready, it will call that function. The other problem we have here is we have this called text area. We're grabbing the input. Let's take a look at our HTML. Where is that? Right here. Where's our form? Let's spread this out a bit. It's a little messy. There we go. There's our text area. And sure enough, it does have the class of form underscore text area. Okay, that's fine. And I'm grabbing that. But that really tends to make this on input function really rigid or brittle. It really relies on accessing directly this DOM element. But this on input really comes from this listener. So I probably should not try to access the text area directly. We use this because since it was the text area that fired that input event, so this text area, when I type something, an event is fired. It's generates an event, and my listener will get that event. And there is a this, and you can refer to the input as this. So I could just simply say $this, just like this. That way, I don't have anything accessing directly in here, at least not from my input. So it's more portable. So I do encourage you to, where possible, use this. What is this? Well, this is the thing that created the event. So this is the text area. So you are essentially inside the text area when this fires. So this is the text area, and you can treat it the same as if you've done a lookup. Okay. Also, a problem with this one. We have this dot counter. We could do this, but once again, what if we had a different counter that also had a dot counter class? And dot counter was really just for visual. We may have a bunch of counters on our page, and they all have a class of dot counter. May have got a counter of the number of tweets I have. Maybe up here, you have 10 tweets, class equals dot counter, because I want to format it a certain way. Well, I only want to get the counter that is inside this form. Well, how would I do that? So let's take a look at our HTML again. So here's my this. So I'm here. So when I'm inside my function on input, I know that this is where I am. And this is HTML, which is a form of XML. So pointy brackets, and it has siblings, parent. It's like a parent-child relationship. I've got this section here. That section has a form inside it. There's the form. That form contains the text area and a div, and then span as well. If I'm here, I should be able to navigate my way relatively to my counter. And the way I do that is, well, I'm the text area. I know, because I know that the HTML, where the form is constructed, that this text area belongs to a form. So if I look upwards or at my parent, I'm probably going to find a form someplace. There may be stuff in between. There may be a div in there. Yeah, that could happen, I suppose. Who knows? But at some point, if I go up, I'm going to hit a form because I know I'm inside a form. So if I go up, I'm going to find a form. And then once I'm in a form, I know there's probably a counter inside that form somewhere. The way I do that programmatically is when I'm in my text area, I'm in this, I will simply find the next form is called the closest form upwards. And there is a jQuery function called closest. So what I can do is this. Using the $sign variable in form equals, I can go input. Well, let's find the closest form. So we'll go closest, which is a J function. The closest function, it looks up. It'll look up until it finds the thing you want. If it finds it, if it doesn't, you're not going to get anything. But we're assuming there's going to be a form somewhere above this. I'll just say form. And since it doesn't have a dot or a pound, it'll find the actual element form. It's going to find a form. So I'm looking upwards to find a form. Great. So now I have the form that encloses the text area and the other stuff, the tweet button and my counter. So now I can look back down again and I can find where's the counter. So what I can do here, instead of doing this, once again, grabbing the counter directly, why don't I instead starting at my form, I can use the find function. And I want to find something. Well, what do I want to find? Here I am. I'm in the form. Let's look downwards. I want to find something that's my counter. I could find a span, but that's kind of generic. You know, there could be a couple spans in here. So it might be kind of dangerous just to look for a span, although that would work in this case. So it's going to find a span, but I probably should look for maybe a counter. So there's probably really only one thing with a class of counter as a child of this form. So that's probably a good thing to look for. So I'll look for dot counter, like that. Okay, so now I have my counter, or set my counter to my value. Okay, so this is the same thing, but we've made it a little safer. Let's put this up here, there. So what we've done here is a safer version. It is only relative to this particular form. Maybe there's multiple forms on the page. Maybe there's multiple things called dot counter. So now it's all relative to this. Look up, find my form, and then look down again and find my dot counter, and then use that counter for everything going forward. Okay. And let's move this down because our calculation is above that. So let's put that right there. Okay. Okay. Let's see if this still works. This is different every time, so I never know if it's going to work. So, ooh, I think it actually worked first time. There's a shocker. Wow. Looks like it worked. So it did, in fact, find my counter. Now, you may be saying, well, that is a little more code. You're right. It is an extra line of code or two. So, but it's worth it because now I'm not referring to anything, any absolute selectors in this on input function. So it is now more general purpose and it doesn't lock me into any particular selectors. Okay, so there's a really good point. Try to use this where possible. It's a really good thing to do. This is not bad. Let's make one more change. Now, this is more an advanced change. Okay. And by the way, does anyone know why this still works? You notice that on input is being used before it's declared. Anyone know why it still works? Because apparently it still works, and it does. So why does that work? Even though I've got my function after its use, but this still works. Why is that?
Hoisting.
This is a functional expression, so by definition, it's not hoisted. But you're on the right track, though. So why does this work? This document.ready, what that means is by the time you get to here, JavaScript has read everything. It's all every single script has been read, all the CSS, everything in JavaScript has now been read and it's all ready. So if we look at our index.html, we're loading a bunch of different files here. Where we go, all these script files. So there's our jQuery. So all these being read, all the stuff is being read. So document ready does not fire until everything is ready, until everything has been read. So in actual fact, JavaScript has seen this before. So in effect, this is really above this because JavaScript in the browser read every single file and it saw this thing called on input. So it says, when it comes to here, it says, have I seen something called on input? Yes, I have. I know where that is. That is here. Okay. By the way, we can use a shortcut for the document.ready. It's a little different. It looks like this instead. You can use that, or you can just simply say function $ instead also works. So you can go this. Instead of doing that, you can go, I always mess this up, and then do this. Like that. There. That is another way to write document.ready. In fact, this is now the preferred way to write document.ready. jQuery doesn't like the old .ready way. They kind of like you to use this instead. In fact, even this, right? If you really want to be cool, there. That is also document.ready. You may see it either one of those ways or either three of those formats, either the really terse format, which is like what the heck is that? Well, that is document.ready in jQuery, or function keyword. This is also a document.ready, or you may see it the old school way, which is really document.ready. Okay. Or even this, you go function that, and a real old school without even the arrow function. So you may see it any of those ways. So we'll leave it like this, maybe there. Okay. All right. But further to that, you notice this function called on input. That really is a generic name, isn't it? It's like, well, wait a sec, that's kind of dangerous, isn't it? Because knowing what we know about browser JavaScript, this is not a module, is it? This is not self-contained. This function called on input is visible to every single JavaScript file that got loaded. If you look at the way your HTML loads JavaScript, it loads this, then this. There's no requires happening here. They get read. So every function in every single file is available to every other file. So if someone else used a function called on input, I got a problem, because whichever one got read is the one that's going to get used, and the other one's going to probably fail because it's constant. You can't overwrite it. So I got a problem. In fact, let's go to our browser, and if I go, I should see this thing called on input. Let's go console.log, and on input. It's even helping me. Look at that. And it's a function. So it's available. Everyone can see it. Even on the console, they could say, yeah, console log. I mean, I suppose they could run it. I suppose doesn't do much good on input. You could do something, I suppose, input and maybe do something with it. Probably not a good idea. So it's a bit of a problem because unless I make some really unique name for this, like maybe tweeter, char, counter, oops, no minus, underscore there. Awful name, of course, because we choose camel case, but anyway, there, some really super unique name. Okay, now I'm kind of guaranteed it's probably not used in any of the potentially tens or hundreds of other files that I'm calling, and perhaps other libraries that I'm using as well. Maybe I'm using some real other cool stuff, like I got this, oh, that spinner. Yeah, they imported the spinner thing. There's that spin library. No idea. Maybe it uses it on input. So it could have a conflict. So how am I going to get around this? I don't want to have to put my function back in here and make it look an ugly anonymous function and obfuscate what's going on in my document.ready. But at the same time, I don't want to give it some crazy name like, tweeter charcar on input, because that was a nice name. I like that name. No conflict yet, but it could be. So now this is a fairly advanced topic and not one that you're responsible to know, but it is something you'll commonly see in professional code. Right now, this is available. This is what's called a global function. It is available to anyone. It's attached, in technical terms, to the window object of the browser. So it's window.onInput. And I could easily have console log, also console log window.onInput, and I'd get on input because the window is the top object in my page. I want to be able to hide this from everyone except those who need it. Any suggestions how I can hide this? Now, if this was Node, it'd be great. I'd simply put it in a file and I just simply don't export it. I don't put it inside module exports, but we're in a browser and all of these functions are available to everyone else. So even if I have these other files, on input is still visible to all of them. Any suggestions how I can handle this one? Well, this one's a bit of a trick, and this is what jQuery does recommend as one of their best practices. They do recommend also to name your functions and do it this way because it's cleaner. But in addition, to avoid the problem of having conflicts, they recommend something else. And forget that, there's also one other problem that could potentially happen. And believe it or not, this does happen. What is that dollar, by the way? This dollar thing, we got dollar this, all this dollar. What are those dollars doing? What does that dollar actually mean? Anyone know? I think this is the first jQuery lecture we had. What is that dollar? Well, that dollar, that's jQuery. I mean, it is actually, it is jQuery. It literally is J, Q, or Y. There we go. That's what it is. It actually is with pretty much 3 equal signs. Not quite like that, but that's what that is. So that dollar sign is the same as going jQuery.document or jQuery find my thing. It is exactly the same. Let's prove that. Hopefully. Just close the counter. It works. Apparently it still works. So jQuery and dollar are interchangeable. And I think we talked about that in the first lecture of jQuery. This is simply a convenience. We have replaced jQuery, which is the real function, with dollar. They alias the dollar to jQuery because it is a nice, short, and really fun thing to type. I love typing dollar signs, preferably lots of zeros after them. But yeah, if they're mine, okay. But here's the thing. What would we do if, let's say, we're writing this really cool app and we come across this other really cool library that, also aliases the dollar? Oh no, we got a problem because jQuery uses dollar, but this one does. And you may ask, does that exist? Yes, it does. There are libraries that use the dollar also. Not many of them, but they do. Maybe you're one because nothing's stopping you. You can write a library that uses a dollar as alias for function. It makes your code more concise, more terse. But as you can see, this can cause severe problems with your jQuery, can it? Like, this is not good. So not only do we want to hide our on input, it might not be a bad idea to hide our dollar too, to make sure we don't have any conflicts. Well, there's a way we can do that kind of all in the same step. Anybody heard of an IFI? If and only if. Yes, that's a good one. If and only if. Kind of close. It's spelled like this. IIFE. Well, what it is, it stands for, let's actually search for what is an IFI. There. Pull this down. There we go. Good Google searching. Yes. Immediately invoked function expression. You see them in jQuery code and you go like, what are they doing there? I remember my first time when I saw one, I was doing I think it was some weird co-browsing library for help the customer with their forms, and like they can browse together. And it's going to go, wow, that's interesting. That looks like an IFI. And it was. I saw that and I'm like, what is that? There's my function, but then I'm executing it right away. Like it hasn't got a name. So that's exactly what it is. That's a functional expression right there. We know that that is a functional expression, but we are executing it immediately. And you may say, well, what the hell good is that? Well, it's actually very useful because it's in fact used for that very purpose of encapsulating things in JavaScript. Not just jQuery, by the way, it can be anything. I can encapsulate all of this in an IFI. So in an immediately invoked functional expression, so everything's hidden. So on input, we hidden. This is what it would look like, and it's not that hard. I first put brackets around the whole thing, and I write my function. Here's a new function. I'll give it a parameter. I'll call it X. Terrible name. Okay, there. There's a function, and there it is. So there. We put round brackets because it doesn't work without them. Okay, so you kind of have to put round brackets and then you execute it. There. So there is an immediately invoked functional expression that takes a parameter X, just like that. Okay. And by the way, if I put 1 in there, guess what happens? What's X going to be? X is 1, right? Or if I say hello, and I console log hello, or console log spoiler, X, well, I'm going to console log hello. So that's kind of interesting. So you can pass parameters because it's just a function. You don't have to go bracket, bracket. You can give it parameters. So if I've got this immediately invoked functional expression and I give it the parameter hello, then inside of it, it prints X, which is hello. But now X is only visible. That X is only visible inside the function. If I console log X outside of here and did that, what do we think is going to happen? Well, right? Yeah, it's going to explode. There is no X. X is not defined. So I get the usual nasty error from JavaScript saying, hey, buddy, you got no X. Do something about that. So I've now succeeded in encapsulating that X and or any other function. I can make a function inside there. No one says I can't do that. There. I can make a function inside this called say hello. Why not? Sure. Or anything, any function, which by the way is a closure, which we know. But also, if I try to run say hello, or something. Well, also another explosion, it's not going to work because say hello is also hidden. It only exists in the scope of that function. Very cool. We take advantage later on in React. You will see an awful lot of this. You will see a lot of these closures being used all the time. Okay. So what does this buy for us? Well, we kind of figured out that I can certainly now hide on input. That's great. So if I simply take my IFI like this. Let's make a blank iffy again. There's my blank iffy. It is kind of iffy, isn't it? Ha ha ha. Okay. All right. If I take my blank iffy and I put everything inside it, like that. Wow. It's still going to work. Well, it should. Everything is still there. I mean, dollar is still outside. So see if it works. Once again, it works. So I didn't change anything. I just wrapped everything in an iffy. But let's take a look. Oops, let's pull up our dev tools. There's the page. And now let's try to find that on input. And you're probably guessing what's going to happen. Let's try that. Is it going to console log? Oh, there we go. Ooh. Not defined. It doesn't exist. Well, success. I have now successfully hidden my on input. So this is a very common professional trick you'll see in jQuery. I like the name on input. It really is a great name, but it's pretty generic, so I can hide it there. Okay. So there's my first problem solved. It doesn't exist. But clearly it still works, doesn't it? Because it's working. Okay. Let's get to my second problem here. My second problem was what? Oh yeah, it was the dollar. What if I have another library that's using dollar on me? Not as common, but it could happen. And we can also get around that with our iffy as well. Since we're doing an iffy, can't hurt. It's like a minimal change to protect it. Remember I talked about if I have X here and I have something here, like 5, well, inside this function, that X becomes 5, doesn't it? Because I'm executing the function with the parameter 5. So X is now 5 all the way through here. So I console log X anywhere in here, I'm going to get 5. Well, what if X was instead of 5, it was jQuery? Oh, well, now X is jQuery. Well, wow, I could just do this, couldn't I? X and X. That might work. I'm always scared doing this, but let's try it. Well, look at that. It actually worked. And my dollar is gone. Okay. So that worked. But like X is kind of a crappy name. So why, I don't know. Anybody have any suggestions what I could use instead of X? Can I get one suggestion for the studio audience? What can I use instead of X in my function as the parameter?
jQuery?
Well, I'm calling it with jQuery. And I could have gone, I don't need it. I could have said jQuery here, of course. I could have, but then I don't need the iffy for that. I can call it jQuery because it's unlikely another module or library is using the word jQuery. Someone's saying use dollar. Well, that's not a bad idea. Why don't I simply say dollar? There. I can use dollar again. Oops, there. That's perfectly valid. Dollar is a perfectly valid variable name, just like X was. But now this dollar exists only in scope. This is not the same dollar as this dollar out here. This is now the parameter. Oops. There we go. This dollar is the same as my X. In fact, let's do a thing. I'm going to rename variable. By the way, anyone seen this? The only way you really should be renaming variables is in VS Code, select rename variable, X. It only renamed the variable in scope. Okay, look at that. If I had a search and replace on dollar, I'd have some pretty nasty things happening, wouldn't I? But I can do a right click and a rename, or F2 on many computers does work. F2 also does the same thing. I can call it dollar, or that works too. Not the best name, but I like dollar. Okay, there we go. So I have successfully both hidden my on input function and I'm protecting my dollar. So got to protect your dollars because really it's just jQuery now. So even if some other module or library did use the dollar, I'm perfectly fine because now I'm using jQuery throughout, and that is now parameter to my IIFE. Okay. Once again, this is a fairly advanced thing, but it is recommended by jQuery, and you can, it's 2 lines. Add that line, and you're good to go. And serves 2 functions, hides your functions and protects your dollar. Okay. All right. So let's try something else here. Let's take a look at one more thing. Why don't we talk about Ajax? Everyone loves the Ajax post, don't they? Where is that one? Where is that one? Here it is. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into how much I don't like this code like that. Maybe I will. Anyone knows something wrong with this? Like, what's that else doing there? There's a return. That else never happens, like ever. It's not possible. So it doesn't do anything. There. So if you got a return there, you don't need an else. So I probably should have a return other than else. So yeah. So, okay. I'll stop my rant on else's. Okay. But let's talk a little bit about Ajax. So a couple things we can do here. This is an Ajax post. This is kind of the old school way of doing an Ajax post. And it works fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But jQuery's come a long way since that. And there's better ways to do Ajax posts and gets. And where's the get? I think I got the get here somewhere. Let's try to find the get. They also do the same thing. Where'd they bury that one here? Where's our load tweets? Oh, there it is right there. Oh, okay. They're doing a little better. They're using a get tweets with a callback function. That's not too bad. Still not ideal, but it's $get. There is a $get and a $post. The really old school way is by going $.ajax and then saying, this is a type post, this is a type get. There is a much easier way to do that. And it's by using, no surprise, $.post. I could have gone $.post instead. And a $post takes just 2 parameters. That's all you need. The URL, where to post to, I'll just copy that out of there. I'm going to post to there, and what to send. Well, I'm going to send my data. There. That's it. So it's a much cleaner way to do a post in jQuery. Now, you may say, well, okay, but like, aren't you missing stuff? Well, of course, yes, I am. In this case, I've got the done, but the new jQuery $.post is compatible with promises. So this returns a promise. So this can be a .then. And we all love promises, in which, by the way, I believe I'm doing another talk on promises where we do a complete, come on, .then, there. A nice dive into promises. It'll be a promise-a-loza coming up sometime soon. So stay tuned for that one. .then. So promises are, of course, more standard. You're seeing them. .done is a jQuery artifact only. But .then, that's JavaScript. That's a promise. And of course, the same thing. It takes a function like that. There you go. And there's your post. And then you do whatever you want to do inside here. You may want to give your function a parameter, like a result or something. But in this case, the post doesn't really return anything of any value, so we don't use it. In this case, they have data. It's grayed out. It's not used. So I could have a data, but really it's not needed. It's totally not used. So just an empty argument. Okay. So I have my post tweets.data .then. And then .then, well, I can call the same stuff. There. You do that. It's like that. And it's just a little cleaner. And this is what you'd normally see in more modern jQuery code, is you'd see $.post, URL data, .then. And it should do exactly the same thing. It was form data. There we go. There we go. Okay, try her again. Okay. Take 2. Hello. There. Double check. Yes, okay. And hello there. Okay, it worked. Whew. All right. So it's an easier one to use. Once again, I'm pretty sure, I know for certainly the boot camp, I'll be holding a big promise party maybe this Friday. Take a look. And I think I'll invite everyone if you guys want to show up as well. Lines 80 and 81. Okay. So, oh, that's interesting. Yes, this is a cool one. Let's take a look at this. What do they do here? Like, what is that? Wouldn't that just be load tweets? Ooh, that's bad spelling. Like that, which is what I did in mine. Well, yeah, it could be. That's exactly what they did. But maybe you can do something more fancy. In this case, they're also, by the way, clearing that. So that's actually a separate line. We'll break them out separately. They got kind of fancy there. So, and input dot, there we go. We'll trigger a key up there. I think that's how it works. Let's take a look. Okay, so what they're doing here is they've used a different method. By the way, this is perfectly fine. If you have this, totally fine. And this is probably what you're seeing. Clear it out and then load tweets again. You're good to go. They did something a little unusual here, which is perfectly fine. Instead, they triggered a key up, and which of course just changes the counter, and they triggered a reload event. Interesting. A reload. Where is that? Let's take a look. I gotta find this. Oh, there it is. Now, hold on. There. Okay. In this case, what they did was they made another listener in their document ready. It said, oh, if you receive a reload event, because by the way, you can create your own events. That's why the on version is so much better, because you can make custom events, called Gary reload there. And I can trigger a Gary reload. Doesn't matter. It's my name. My event. I can call my event anything I want. But I'm going to call it reload. Is that reload? And this one there. So they created, or they added a listener for the reload event. So whenever the reload event gets fired on your tweets, it will run load tweets, which is kind of cool. And it's the same thing as calling load tweets. They just triggered one. They said, find the tweets list and trigger a reload event on it. And then any listener that is listening for those things can go, I've just seen a reload event. Let me handle that. So it just avoids you having to call load tweets here. Is it better? Kind of keeps load tweets kind of encapsulated in this file, because somebody reading this might go, what the hell is load tweets? Where is it? Oh, I don't see it. Oh, where the heck is it? Now I got to go searching everywhere for load tweets. But a trigger, yeah, it's a trigger. And I can probably find something trigger, but for now, load tweets is not here. And it's encapsulated inside that app.js. So that's what was happening there. It's a different way to do it. Nothing wrong with it. And this is probably what you'd likely see in more professional code. You trigger something and then handle it later on, rather than calling load tweets directly. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for, we obviously can't cover the entire Tweeter app. We touched on a few key points. Is everyone clear on the form serialize, this thing? The form serialize, right? Where when you submit the form, it grabs the this, because this is who got the submit. So there was a listener on submit, which is probably up here somewhere. What a mess. Who wants to guess what I don't like about this file? I'm trying to find an on submit, right? So where's on submit? On click. Oh, there it is, on submit. Yeah, this document.ready should be like 3 lines. One event handler. That's a funny one for doing submits. That one, maybe that one. So a couple of handlers. That's all that should be there. This document ready really should be 4 or 5 lines, a bunch of one-liners on this, done, and then have all your functions below it. And if you want to get, safe, wrap it in iffy. Okay. So I'm not a big fan of doing things this way because it does obfuscate these key things. Because once again, the first person or the first thing a professional developer is going to do, he's going to go straight document ready. Where's document ready? There it is, right there. Okay. What's happening in this program? What is this? Function? I don't belong there. What is that? Like, come on. So he's going to grab that, get rid of that. Just put that right outside of there. There, okay. They just want to see these things, just those one-liners. Put everything else outside. It's just much cleaner code. Okay. Well, that is our talk on jQuery best practices. There's a lot of other best practices, things like detach. I'll give you a quick taste of that one. For this one, we could have done something really kind of cool. Where's our fortuitive tweets? Oh, this one. Oh, spot the error there. Anybody? Come on. Seriously? Come on. Anyone spot the error? I'm doing that again and again and again.
Slash
Maybe.
tweets.
I should have made a variable called tweets, right? Or container or something like, const container equals. Like, come on. Who wrote this thing? Read my boss. Okay, sorry. Okay, so there. And then container. There. A little better. Or maybe the dollar. I want to be consistent, right? Yeah, let's be consistent. There we go. Okay. A little better. And maybe I could have put the .html there, sure. Or done this. There. There, like that. Just clear out the container. And then, so it's more efficient. I'm not calling that $tweets over and over again. I couldn't let that stand. It was just too much. So anyway, so there we go. All right. So once again, hopefully just a bunch of one-liners. So that's great. That's a one-liner. I like that one. That's the only one done right in this whole file. There should be a bunch of those in your document.ready. That's all you should see. And the rest should be down below as named functions. And if you really want to wrap it in iffy. Okay. Anyway, as everyone knows, I can go on a long time, but it's at the top of the hour again. So I'll stop now. Okay, everyone, let you guys go.